Something is happening in Mason, Ohio, and the tournament cannot explain it away. Flags are already being packed, chants are already being rehearsed, and inside the operations office of one of the biggest events on the entire tennis calendar, staff are preparing for a level of noise they did not create and cannot fully control. Why does a 21-year-old with no Grand Slam title to her name generate this kind of gravity before she has even walked onto the court? Why did the tournament itself, in its own official announcement, single her out by name? And now that the draw is out, now that the path is real and not theoretical, what happens when the loudest crowd in the building collides with one of the most unforgiving stretches of the entire hardcourt season? Stay with this, because the answer is bigger than one player. It's becoming one of the defining stories of the year. Call her Alex. Not a surname, not a headline. Just Alex the way an entire nation has started saying it, like she belongs to them personally. She has already walked into the Cincinnati Open. It is a tournament that does not need a new star. It already has legends. Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, Mira Andreeva, Iga Swiatek, back to defend the title she won in 2025. This is not a stage where a hot streak can hide. This is a stage that exposes everything. And yet, out of that entire field, the tournament's own player announcement stopped to specifically highlight Alex alongside Brazilian sensation Ju Fonseca for having, in the tournament's own words, some of the most ardent and raucous supporters in the sport. Think about what that actually means. Out of a draw filled with icons, the institution itself flagged her fans by name. That is not hype some fan account invented. That is an organization admitting they have noticed something they cannot fully manage, and the scale of what she has walked into is almost hard to process. In 2025, this tournament pulled in a record 285,571 fans from every state in the country and dozens of nations around the world. That record came out of a $260 million transformation of the ground's new courts, new fan zones, a 40-acre site that doubled the size of what stood here before. It is no longer just a tennis tournament. It is closer to a sporting festival that happens to have a bracket attached. Alex Eala walks into that ecosystem carrying the accumulated hope of a country that has waited generations for a moment exactly like this one. And this time, unlike a few weeks ago, the draw has already answered the first question. She is the no. 17 seed, the highest seeding of her career at this level, which earns her a bye through the opening round. She opens in the second round against the winner of Magda Linette and Elena Gabriela Ruse. Survived that, and the projections point to 9th seeded Amanda Anisimova in the third round. Survived that, and Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova could be waiting in the fourth, a player who has beaten her twice already this year and taken only 8 games total off her in doing it. Survived that, and Jessica Pegula could be standing across the net in the quarterfinal. The same Jessica Pegula she has already beaten once this season, in a final that meant more than any match she had played before it. None of this guarantees anything. Flags do not return serves, chants do not save a match point. If Alex loses early in Cincinnati, all of this noise evaporates into nothing, just another promising story that stalled the moment it mattered most. So why does anyone believe otherwise? Because weeks earlier in Washington, this exact question was already put to the test. Before that tournament even began, organizers revealed that over the previous month. At least 80% of ticket inquiries had nothing to do with the event itself. They were about one specific question: when is Alex playing? That is not the level of attention given to a player still building her name. That is the level of attention given to someone who has already become an event unto herself. And then she nearly blew it. In her opening match against former world No. 4 and Olympic gold medalist Zheng Qingwen, she lost the first set and fell into a breakdown in the second. For a moment, it looked exactly like the story everyone secretly feared, the hype outrunning the results. Then, quietly, something shifted. She broke back, forced a decider, and dismantled Zhang in the third set. 6-1. Not a scare. A statement. The crowd got louder after that win, not before it. That order matters more than almost anything else in this story, because belief that is earned survives losses. Belief that is only borrowed from hype does not. She kept earning hers, match after match, until she reached a final that had no business feeling inevitable against Jessica Pegula, the world no. 3. A player who had spent years in rooms Alex was only just being invited into. Pegula took the first set. Then the skies opened, and the match was suspended overnight with Pegula still ahead. If you know anything about tennis, you know rain delays are dangerous in a specific, cruel way. They don't just pause a match. They pause a mind mid-fight and force it to sit alone with every doubt it was trying to outrun. So what did Alex do when play resumed the next day? She took the second set, then closed the third set 6-0, the final 8 games of the match going her way without interruption. Not a scrape. A statement against a top 3 player in a final on the other side of a rain delay. When the last ball landed, she became the first Filipina in history to win a WTA Tour level singles title. An entire country's tennis history rewritten in one final set. But greatness doesn't reward you with rest. It rewards you with higher stakes. Because now, every tournament she enters is no longer a chance to surprise people. It's a chance to disappoint them. Before a title, a deep run feels like magic. After a title, anything less than magic can start to feel like failure. She barely had time to feel that weight before Toronto tested it directly. 9 matches in 13 days, singles and doubles combined, playing through a rolled ankle against Katie McNally that she shrugged off as nothing serious. Beating Alicia Parks in front of a crowd so loud that opponents have openly commented on it since. Her run, the longest winning streak of her career, finally ended against Belinda Bencic in the round of 16, 6-4, 6-0. A lopsided scoreline after 2 weeks that would have worn down players with far more experience than hers. None of this backstory started in Washington either. Rewind further to Wimbledon, on grass, where the foundation of this entire phenomenon was actually built. Alex became the first player from the Philippines to ever reach the second week of a Grand Slam singles draw in the Open era. Not the first to win around the first in the modern history of the sport, to survive long enough to see the second week. Then came the moment that turned a good tournament into legend. On center court, facing defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek, she won a first-set tiebreak that stretched to 9 points, then closed it out 6-2. Not a near upset. A win on center court over a defending champion. She later described looking into the stands during that tournament and seeing something she hadn't expected, a crowd that felt almost like a sea of Filipino fans, despite Wimbledon tickets being some of the hardest in the world to obtain. Think about the logistics hidden inside that sentence. People organizing. People flying across the world. People finding their way into one of the most exclusive venues on the planet just to be near her when it mattered. That isn't casual fandom. That's identity. And identity-based support behaves completely differently from results-based support. Results-based fans disappear the moment you lose. Identity-based fans show up anyway, because they were never only cheering for a scoreline. They were cheering for what she represents, a country that has produced legendary boxers and basketball stars, but rarely, if ever, a tennis player capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the very best in the world. A 5-week stretch on grass, a WTA 125 title in Birmingham, a semifinal in Berlin, and then that Wimbledon breakthrough pushed her to a career-high ranking of world no. 28 at the time. 12 months earlier, the conversation around her was cautious whispers about whether she could crack the top 100. By the time the WTA opened voting for its mid-season fan award, Star of the Swing, the results weren't close. She won it with 89% of the vote, more than 80 points clear of the newly crowned Wimbledon champion in second place. That number doesn't happen from casual interest. That happens when an entire fan base mobilizes with the urgency usually reserved for something far bigger than a tennis poll. So here is Cincinnati, arriving at exactly the moment this story cannot afford to slow down. A record-breaking crowd on the books from last year. A freshly rebuilt, sprawling venue. A draw stacked with players who have already beaten bigger names than hers, on a course that could put 4 different Grand Slam champions in her way before a final is even in view. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you if you're paying close attention. Every one of her biggest wins so far has raised the ceiling of what people now expect from the next one. Raised expectations are their own opponent, one that doesn't live on the other side of the net, but entirely inside her own head. Can she carry the weight of an entire country's hope into a draw built like this? Can she manage the shift from being the hunter to being the hunted, the player everyone studies instead of overlooks? Can she walk out in Mason in front of a crowd that will once again contain fans who are there specifically because of her, and still play like nobody is watching? Nobody knows. That isn't a dodge. That's the actual truth. And it's exactly why this is worth watching instead of assuming how it ends. Elite sport doesn't become gripping through guaranteed victory. It becomes gripping through uncertainty wrapped around someone who has already proven she's capable of something extraordinary. If she were ranked 200 and unknown, an early exit would mean nothing. But she is not unranked, and she is not unknown. She is a champion now, a Grand Slam second-week competitor, a player who beat a defending Wimbledon champion on the most famous court in the sport. Every match from here forward carries weight it didn't carry a year ago. That weight will either forge her into something her country has never produced before, or it will become the exact pressure that stalls everything she has built. Maybe that's the real reason the flags keep multiplying wherever she goes. Not because people expect a guaranteed outcome, but because they've learned, over and over, that when things look darkest down a set, down a break, sitting through a rain delay with a final slipping away, she has a way of finding something extra, exactly when it matters most. That's not a guarantee. It's a pattern. And patterns like that are exactly what turn a good athlete into a phenomenon. So when the lights come up in Cincinnati, when her name is finally called and the first Philippine flag rises somewhere in that crowd, followed by another and another, until the chants roll through the stands like something rehearsed for days, even though nobody planned it at all. Remember how this actually started. Remember Washington, where 80% of the questions were about one player before she had even played a match. Remember the third set against Zheng, when a stumbling start turned into a statement. Remember the rain delay against Pegula and the 6-0 set that followed it. Remember center court and a defending champion who never saw it coming. None of that happened because a crowd willed it into existence. It happened because, point after point, match after match, she kept finding a way to be the player worth flying across the world to watch. Cincinnati doesn't need her to already believe that. Cincinnati is simply the next place she has to prove it all over again, against players who have already beaten legends themselves, on a stage that has already broken bigger names than hers. Whether she runs deep into this tournament or falls in her opening match isn't even the most interesting question anymore. The most interesting question is what she does in the moment right before the pressure becomes unbearable, that split second between the crowd going silent and the ball leaving her racket. That is where every one of her biggest wins has actually happened. Not in the celebration after, in that split second before, and in the coming days, under lights, in front of one of the loudest crowds this rebuilt tournament has ever hosted, we finally get to watch her walk back into that exact split second one more time. Nobody, not the analysts, not the bookmakers, not even her own team can tell you what happens next, which is exactly why an entire tennis world and an entire nation standing behind her simply cannot look away.